guys, welcome to our YouTube channel, all things Joshy and Tara. We talk about everything.
We do. Hello, everyone. Today, for the moment, we're going to talk about your move from the Detroit area to the Chicago area when you were 8 or 9 years old. I think 9, we've decided, right?
Yeah, I think it was 9.
9 years old.
Why are we starting this conversation today?
We were out for breakfast earlier today with 2 of our dearest friends, and your 4th grade teacher walked in, and just by chance, she is friends with one of our closest friends who we were out for breakfast with, and they used to get their nails done together, and then you turned around and you're like, oh, that was my 4th grade teacher. So all the years you and I have been together, I had never paid attention to. I always said you moved here when you were like 8 or 9, so it was 9 years old, and then 4th grade was the first year you started school here. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So with all the time we've spent together, we never really talked about that, and then she was your first teacher that you had ever had. So I thought that was kind of neat and cool. You said hi to her, and she is a little bit older now, so I could tell in 2 seconds of talking with her, she seemed very, very sweet, but she also was a little bit older, so cognitively she didn't seem to be all the way all with it today, but she definitely at least pretended. I wouldn't say pretended. She recognized, she recognized your name and all of that.
Obviously, I'm not going to look the same as I did in 4th grade.
Well, that's for sure. That took 15 minutes for you to get ready for this. So.
It really did. Yeah, there's still a work in progress here. So my parents, my dad got transferred here to open up. My uncle owned a business back in Detroit, and it was a mortgage. He was a mortgage broker, and he wanted to open a Chicago division. So I personally think it was a reason for him to remove us from the entire Detroit area. And honestly, to backstory all of that, in all fairness, my grandparents were very wealthy.
Let's not go down.
No, quick. I want to say how I moved here.
No, you just moved here. So,
okay, fine.
Yeah,
fine. We're going to miss all the good stuff. But anyway,
no.
We moved here.
We
moved here. We were moving here, and it was 4th grade. And so I was telling Joshy, it's so crazy because when I lived in Detroit, in suburbs of Detroit, Southfields, it's all I knew. It was, from birth on to 4th grade. And, we got bused to school. And as I was talking to you, I go, it's so strange because I now realize that it was about a good 15 minutes transport, out of the area to get in Detroit. I was on buses, and my parents said we're moving to from Detroit to Chicago, and of course my world was turned upside down. I was 4th grade, and I was I don't know what we're doing, and I'm 9, and my sister is 6. We move here, and where we lived in Lake, I think it was, I forgot what it was called, Lakewood. Come back to that. That's menopause, by the way, guys. Anyways, so we moved here to Wheeling, Illinois, and we moved in the dead of winter. Okay, so first of all, that was crazy town because Chicago was having probably some of the worst storms it had ever had. But we moved here, and we were getting acclimated and getting ready to go into the school year and whatever. And I was coming into the second half of the school year, so I believe we
started school in the middle.
So it was winter. I believe it was the holiday time we did our move, and then we started the school year. And now that it's coming back to me, I think that was the case.
Your parents were very thoughtful to at least allow you to finish out your school year where you were.
Well, it wasn't all my parents. I mean, it really was my uncle and my aunt trying to get us out, and so they moved us here, and they said they needed to open up the shop real quickly, and that's a whole other issue, but whatever. Anyway, so we moved here, and I was saying I went from busing, and I had my school and whatever, and then I went to...
I deserve a medal.
Totally. I ended up becoming... everybody at that time were latchkey kids, right? So your parents all worked, and you kind of were doing your own things on your own. And I'm 9 years old, moving to a city that I don't know anybody, a state that I don't know anybody. I have no family here. My parents know nobody, and we start school. And I was telling you how I used to walk. So when we first arrived here, my mom went up and down our cul-de-sac area, and she knocked on every single door to introduce me and my sister to anyone that lived. Yeah, she's we have a daughter this our age. We have another daughter. She's this age. Do you have any kids in your home that match these ages? My daughters don't know anybody. Mm-hmm. So I will say she was she literally knocked on every single door. She brought cookies, homemade cookies. I remember, and the first people that answered the door were like Mindy and Marcy Shillman, who became my first friends. They actually lived right down the street from me. What would happen is after winter break happened, we learned how to walk, and we would have to walk this back area over creeks, like in this, like truly, you would never send your kids to walk to school like this. And we would all go, our whole cul-de-sac, all the parents would send the kids off. So like I'm 9, my sister's 6, and we don't like know what we're doing. And we're all walking to and from school. No cell service. I mean, basically it's like, I'll see you when you get back home. And it was
there were no
crazy.
cell phones. Yeah,
right,
just,
exactly. There's like nothing.
times, yeah.
And so it was pretty much like you head out in the morning and then you walk back after school, and we'll see you when you get there. And hopefully you'll get there, because we're not going to call in to see if if you got there or not. And it just, every man for himself, which is so strange. But the teacher that I saw today, Miss Spiewak, I remember her so vividly because she was my first teacher when I moved to Chicagoland area and to Wheeling. But she truly like took me in, like I knew nobody. And so she was one of those teachers that just was so special at the time. And I got to Tarkington School, which was like one of the elementary schools in Wheeling, Illinois. I had my neighbors, which were Marcy and Mindy, but it turns out the class that we were in, or the classes that we were in, I met all these other people that like later on became my friends, until my parents were already, so Wheeling was like that temporary location we were moving to. But in the end, we ended up moving to Buffalo Grove, where you came into the picture. But when we just got settled, literally just got settled in there. And my parents were already looking with their other friends, like to figure out how to move to Buffalo Grove. With their next move which was going to be our final move, which wasn't our final move because it was the finale of my parents' marriage. It was like 2 years later, but that's okay. But it was super crazy, talking to you about this as we were like leaving breakfast today, because you remember all these things. And you go, God, I would have never let my kids ever do that. And on top of, I did a back-to-back move. It was easier for me to move like 4th grade. But when I was moving into your district at the end of 6th grade into 7th grade, all of you guys like grew up together. So that was coming in like at the junior high level.
Yeah, that's what I had said to you today when we pulled out at breakfast. I was like, it was very neat for me to like see your first teacher that you'd ever had here. And then when I said that must have been like really hard, we were driving home and from earlier today, and I said to you, like, that must have been like really hard for you to move, like in 4th grade at that point, when you didn't know anyone. And then you had brought up that move was actually easier than the next move, which was just, probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from Wheeling to Buffalo Grove. And that made a lot of sense because at that point, in 4th grade, you're 9 years old, as we were talking about. And so that was tough for you, of course, but like it was definitely.
But everyone's at the playground and they're all
right. But it was like definitely more challenging. It sounds like, and then that made a lot more sense when you said that when you moved into a new district and for 7th grade. So which is when we met. But yeah, so it was. But I think it was just kind of eye opening for me. It was like really neat to see that. Just to like see your first teacher, and then you said that she was actually a really important, like a good teacher and like a really important person for you when you first moved here. So
yeah, she was actually incredible. And I don't remember like all of my teachers. There's only special ones, which is so funny when you think about it, because it was truly her in 4th. It was her in 4th grade, and then Mrs. Frank in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So like just like that 4, 8. Mm-hmm. Like it was cool. Yeah. But she did. I moved into Wheeling, and the community was already built. I mean, we were in these like townhomes, and everyone was on top of each other and grew up together. And we did come in not knowing anybody, but I do think it was a great advantage to have my mom at least start the ball rolling, because it turns out our cul-de-sac that we were on, they were all kids, mm-hmm. like everybody, all different ages. So we were all truly walking to and from school together and spending our time together. We used to break dance at the end of the block, if you want to know, on like a cardboard box. Aging myself. Yeah. But it is cool.
Yeah, it was like really neat. No, it was neat to see her. And then, and then you were talking about walking to school and how we definitely, as parents, never would have allowed that to take place. Or, I mean, certainly, I mean, even from here to the junior high where the girls went, like everyone would freak out, all the parents would freak out, and it was like a 5-minute walk or seven
But it's
minute
across
walk.
the main street.
Yeah, but yeah, so it was just it was a completely different time. But it was, yeah, at least for me, it was a really neat takeaway to meet her, like I've said a few times, and then talk through it. And then you had mentioned that your friends Marcy and Mindy, and then old friend of yours Shelly as well. Like these names that are still like in your life, to a certain degree, still today. Go all the way back to when you first moved from Detroit to the Chicago area. So
Yeah,
so it was
like, I
just,
mean,
it
I
was just
met
neat. It was
Shelley Cohn, who it turns out like, Tony Pestine was like a year younger, but like she was part of this group. And there was a whole group of us that lived in this area in Wheeling, and all the parents became friends. And part of what was pushing like my parents along with all these other, like there was the Gilberts and the Pestines and the Bowers and us and the Cohens, and we were all together. But Charlie Cohen, who ended up becoming my dad's best friend, because it was very Melrose Placey. Like all of us were kind of together, and the kids were all together, and my parents met friends from the synagogue because they helped start the synagogue. And Charlie was the principal. It turns out he was the principal in your school. And so he kept pushing everybody. He's like, we should all go to the Buffalo Grove area. And at the time, I remember, my parents had just arrived, and then that was our temporary location. I didn't know we were going to end up in Buffalo Grove, but part of the reason why we did is because Charlie and all of our group all ended up in the direction where Charlie was teaching. And it turns out he was the principal, and his daughter ended up becoming one of my best friends. And his other daughter, whose name also is Tara Beth, coincidentally, we did not realize that, Tara Beth became best friends with my sister. And then we moved to your district, where like if I didn't have him in our life, I didn't even know if I would have moved to Buffalo Grove. And then that's where I ended up becoming, and finally find you.
Yeah, we met in 7th grade. So
grade.
But the whole purpose of this one was to talk about your experience of moving to a new place when you were 9, and then having to be moved again, not having it, but having to move again by you were probably 12 or 13 at that point. So around 13, I would imagine. Yeah, moving into 7th grade. So
7th grade is
you had 13.
12?
So 12
No.
to 13.
Yeah.
13 years old probably. So
I don't even know.
yeah, but it was
No, 12.
12.
I know that I had my bat mitzvah when I was 12.
There you go.
You didn't come to that one, but
I did not.
I did not. Yeah, it was weird. We had my cousins and myself, we were all very close. Like in age, we were all like born back to back to back to back to back. So we when we grew up, before that like time where we actually moved away, we were all very close, because it was every single year a new child was born, basically, in essence. In the one year it was me and Kylie that was born, and my cousin Nikki. And Lori and like Rachel and Lori were like, so there was like a ton of cousins all my age, which was different for you. And so when we were moving away, it was really bizarre to move to a totally different location where we didn't know anybody. Like it'd be hard enough to move to a different place, like close to where you were already living. But we like picked up and moved states in the dead of winter, with no help whatsoever. And it was a little traumatizing. But like I said, it turns out like it was actually okay, because my parents were actually good at that time. Like their marriage was actually good. Their marriage started totally going downhill when we did the next step move, which is what I don't think that they could afford it. That's kind of like part of the demise of everything. I mean, if you think about it, we never moved our kids. Like we never, like they grew up in the same area you did too. Like
I never moved.
You never moved until later on. And and it, like, do you think you would have been okay? Like, I don't know. It's interesting.
I don't know. I think kids are resilient, like we always see and people always say, but I don't know. Yeah, moving has to be like very difficult for kids. I think it maybe not. And every kid is different. Every person is different. But yeah, I don't know how I would have done per se. Like, yeah, I would have.
You had really strong friendsdships by the time I got to your
very much
school.
so. Yeah, no, I had a lot of really, really good friends by junior high for sure. So, yeah, I probably would not have done great. Matt moved after 6th grade, and I remember he struggled for a while. So that's like the same time that's exactly
Right,
the
we
same time
crossed
you
over.
basically moved.
Yeah.
So into like at the same age, you had already done one move, but like at that age of 12 or 13, call it like starting your teenage years. Yeah, I think that would be pretty tough
Yeah.
to pick up and move. I know when he moved to Boston, so they moved from here to all the way out to Boston. Yeah, he definitely had a tougher time,
Yeah.
for a period of time to like find new friends and stuff like that. Yeah, because I think to your point, like at that point, you're pretty much, I don't want to say established as a preteen or about to be a teenager, but most kids kind of have their group of friends that they're hanging out with at that point. So yeah, I'm sure I would have had a really hard time. Yeah. So looking back on it, for you, that's interesting that you had to make two moves within a few years of each other.
Yeah.
That were definitely, and even though the two towns of Wheeling and Buffalo Grove are right next to each other, two completely different,
So different.
just totally different school districts, different kids, and that whole thing. So
different. I mean, totally different. And it is interesting because people like my niece, my sister moved the kids out, and they're like just going into they were in high school and stuff. And my niece like thriving, like it was the best thing that she could ever have done. And like my nephew, it's taken him a little bit longer to get acclimated of where he's at because he had his like true group of guy friends. And they say the kids are resilient. They do figure it out. I do think that if you're going to move like right before high school if you're going to do it because all freshmen come in together, like, and they're all kind of lost, it's probably a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But like when you're in the middle of a year or middle of like,
I didn't realize you moved in the middle of a school year too.
To be totally honest, it just came back to me now that I forgot that we were. And the reason I remember this because the snowstorm was actually horrific. And I remember we were trying to go to Venture, which was like a Kmart back in the day, because we needed to buy all of our supplies. My grandparents came in, Dolly and my dad's parents. They came in to help us. And we didn't know where we were going, and we could barely get through the city because it was so like the snow was piled up everywhere. And I remember my mom was like sobbing. She like put our boots on and she's like taking us up and down the street trying to like meet people.
Yeah, it had to be
it was awful.
Yeah, it had to be a hard move.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think today, this conversation for today really all was just spurred by meeting this first teacher that you had when you moved here. And then I asked you a few questions. And even after having been together so long, there were a couple things that I didn't know. So like, for example, I didn't know right now until you just said that you moved in the middle of a school year, which is like super weird and it had to be really tough. And then and then when you had said to me in the car that the second move was actually tougher than the first move, I was like, oh, that dawned on me. I'm like, yeah, of course, that makes sense because you're older, you were more established at that point you were younger. Yes, it was hard for you to move in, but you then had 3 years under your belt of having made some new friends, and all of a sudden you're being picked up again and being moved into a totally different area, even though it was 5 minutes away, but a totally new area with like people that you didn't know, and entering into a school at that point with people that had already been together for a long time. Most of us had been together a long time.
And it was also super interesting because even though we all came as a clump group and like Charlie was the principal, like they held Shelly back a year after we left from Wheeling to come here. And so Shelly wasn't even moving into the school with me.
Right.
And so because like with stuff that was going on with her, so she wasn't even in my year. And then Tony was still a year younger. And then everybody else was pretty much my sister's age. So like there was Barry and Shara
and some of your friends stayed in Wheeling.
And they stayed in Wheeling. It was like just this crazy weird thing. And on top of it, when we moved into this district, our school, our junior high, was actually no longer in the junior high location. It was like moved location. So we had moved into an area, but we were being bused like 20 minutes, almost like a half hour.
Yeah, when you moved into the district, our school was under construction.
Yes.
So we were moved for 7th and 8th grade to a junior high that was, like you said, like 20 minutes away.
Yeah, your ride must have been forever now that I think about it. Like you were,
25 minutes, So...
And so that was so weird because you were trying to figure it out. But what is interesting is, again, everything happens for a reason. And like I said, if anything, some of the best times we had is in Wheeling because my parents had an incredible group of friends. They kind of remind me of like our La Park people.
Yeah, that's what you said
and
before.
they used to like just play jokes on each other and just be obnoxious, silly, funny. Like they didn't give a shit. It was great. We felt like it was like truly like this Melrose-y place. Like, and my parents were truly at their best during that time. So I would say we had some of the most fun at that time when we had moved. Yeah. Like, so it actually ended up being okay. And then like moving, when all of us actually moved to Buffalo Grove, everyone ultimately got a divorce. They all, like every single one of us, not one of us, every single one of the parents went from all being together to all getting divorces. It was like crazy, like one after another. So that was a little wild. I think that, you know, obviously if people have to move, they have to move. And like I said, kids are resilient for it. But I didn't even remember some of these things until we just started talking today. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I totally forgot that happened, you know, but, yeah.
Well, I thought today, this was all spurred again by this morning because it was cool to like meet her and, and just learn a couple new things about you after all these years together. So, which I think is kind of neat because it's very infrequent nowadays that you and I learn something new about one another, you know, having been together for so long. So,
and it is weird when you say to somebody,
neat.
I was Tara Berlin. I haven't used my name like Berlin, like,
a
long time. Like, it's so crazy.
Every once in a while you say
it. So,
yeah.
And then I forget. Because also, in my mind, we've always been together. So I don't even, when you go to see a teacher, I forget that there was like time before you because I feel like we've just been together our entire life. So when I'm saying, oh yeah, she's my teacher, you weren't even there.
Right.
It's like,
it was
weird.
really neat. It was cool to meet her. So, and you know, even cooler that, you know, a couple of our best friends, you know, like know her as well. And, you know, we're, you know, manicure buddies and all that kind of stuff. And then you had told me that you had seen this Mrs. Spiewak, you know, a few times over the years and stuff like that. But really neat. Thank you everyone for listening. This was really just a spur of the moment type of conversation, which was kind of neat. And I think the takeaway here is talking a little bit about kids moving in the middle of adolescence, childhood, etc., and some of the challenges and all of that stuff that goes with it. And then also, I think just from a relationship standpoint for us, it was cool, like to just, you know, learn a couple new things about, you know, about my partner and best friend and spouse that I had not known, which is kind of neat.
Good. Every day you should learn one new thing.
Yeah, it's really neat. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
You just hung up, say you want away. You, yeah. You.